Hello, this is Daniel Wu. My topic today is toxic stress, otherwise known as childhood toxic stress, and the possibilities of healing, transformation, and recovery for adults from the long-term trauma and traumatic effects of toxic stress. When I use the term toxic stress, it is a scientific term. If you Google the term, you will find many resources explaining what it is. And some scientists have discovered that the more adverse childhood experiences the child has, the more likely that the child is going to have um, harmful effects in their brain architecture, in their neural systems, in their autonomic systems, that their potential for becoming addicts, alcoholics, or to have eating disorders become exponentially greater than people who don't have toxic stress. That toxic stress shortens life expectancies, that it's associated with autoimmune diseases, inflammatory diseases, early onset of cancers, and many overwhelming medical conditions, as well as the possibility of mental disorders. Before I say more about toxic stress, I want to relate two experiences that were my personal experiences, and then to talk about what happened between the two. The first experience that I'm going to describe was in 1998. I was walking along Elliott Bay, which is a body of water that's part of the Salton Sea, part of Puget Sound. Um, the downtown area of Seattle is built on the edge of Elliott Bay. Where I was walking was on the other side in West Seattle. It was a beautiful day, blue skies, sunny, uh, very warm, uh, no, not much breezes, not humid. It was as nice a summer day as one could want in Seattle. I don't remember at the time that I was under any kind of worrying situation or anything problematic was happening in my life. What I do remember is as I walked, enjoying the view and the feeling, all of a sudden a bolt of lightning, or what felt like a bolt of lightning, hit my guts and I bent over. Um, in hindsight, I think what I had was some kind of a panic attack, but I didn't know that was what it was. I turned my head and saw that across the street from where I was walking was the Alki Tavern, which was a biker bar or tavern. I went to the tavern thinking that a drink would ease the feeling I had, and I had a glass of wine. That was in 1998. About a month ago, in early August this year, 2016, I was taking a walk around Green Lake, which is a lake and park in North Seattle that is very popular. It was a very nice day, a lot of sunshine, it was hot. And about two-thirds of the way around the lake, I bent over. Except it wasn't a bolt of lightning, it was a gigantic belly laugh, and I started laughing out loud. I was bent over with so much laughing that I couldn't stand up for a while. I finally stopped laughing, stood up, and then immediately thought the odds for me were fucked from the beginning. I'm so glad that I am who I am today, able to laugh. Both incidents occurred without expectation on my part. I always prefer the kinds of boats, so to speak, of laughter. That is more common in my life today. In between that time along Alki, in the Alki area of West Seattle, and today, some significant changes occurred in my life. In the fall of 2002, I was notified that I was going to be published as one of the best lawyers in intellectual property in Seattle. I was in the top 10 or 11. At that same time, what had been a flash attack was a chronic sensation. I lived in dread. I was trying to disguise it as best as I could. I was miserable. I couldn't stand myself. In hindsight, I was depressed, but at the time, did not acknowledge that. Around the same time, I met a man who had been practicing Zen Buddhism for 26 years. And we started talking over coffee, and he told me that how we feel we have some control over, that the way we think we had control over, that we don't have to be reacting all the time to anything inside or outside, that it was trainable, and that we could achieve states of, you use the word bliss, but states of equanimity, joyfulness, compassion, very positive states. And he suggested I investigate meditation. I also heard a few other people who meditated in different traditions say similar things. So on January 1 or 2, 2003, I went to the Barnes & Noble bookstore in downtown Seattle, and I went to the shelves where they had meditation materials. Back then, they had a lot of bookcases with meditation materials and Eastern religion materials, including Buddhism, yoga, a lot of things I had never explored in my life before then. I looked around and saw a slim book with the title Comfortable with Uncertainty by Pema Chodron, and opened it up and saw that it had 108 teachings from Tibetan Buddhism, about which I knew nothing, and that each chapter was 1 to 1.5 pages long. I decided that I could try to use this book as a morning meditation resource, that I could read a chapter each morning and then carry forward into the day and practice whatever that chapter talked about. That turned out to be a good decision. I've done that from cover to cover of that book regularly over the past 13 and a half years. When I reached the end, I would begin again at the beginning. I'm not as regular in terms of daily readings from that book because I have a library of Buddhist books that I'm reading from. So sometimes I would use it, sometimes I would not. In that book, Pema Chodron describes compassion practices. And I think it was around the same time I found Sharon Salzer's book on loving kindness or metta and added that to my library. So the first two Buddhist practices that I began with, and I did on a daily basis, are metta and tonglen. In the case of metta, our sons were still young and had to catch a school bus every morning at 6:50 a.m. So what I did was get up and help get their breakfast together, help them, remind them to get dressed, and help them leave the house in time to catch the bus. After that, I helped clean up the kitchen and then took my shower to get ready to go to work. In the shower, I decided I would do metta every morning, and I did that in the shower for 18 months straight. At the end of 18 months, I did not really need to do so formal a metta practice, because the moment I began it, I could feel my entire body easing, that I could feel my breath expanding. I could feel my internal stress levels go down. I could feel some form of compassion. That's the same as it is for each of the other practices I will describe. It's taught me that when I train, things change internally. Scientists today call that neuroplasticity. It goes well beyond the brain. It goes into all the neural systems throughout my body. It goes into the organs of my body. Another Buddhist practice I began learning in early January 2003 is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. It's also known as insight meditation in the West. It's also known as Vipassana in both the East and the West. It comes from the Satipatthana Sutra, and it is with the first wheel of teachings from the Buddha. I found a used book that I've since learned is the classic resource recommended by most Theravada teachers on how to do the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The first foundation is mindfulness of the body in the body. Most of these practices I did on my own, in the dark, sitting facing a wall. Today I do most of my meditations eyes open outside when I can. But at that time, that's what I practiced. I had Googled and discovered an Insight Meditation Society in Seattle, the Seattle Insight Meditation Society. So I started attending sits and Dharma talks at the Seattle Insight Meditation Society. After a year, I also began to go to some weekend retreats, non-residential retreats with visiting teachers from different traditions, mainly Theravada Buddhism, coming in to lead retreats, lead meditations sessions, and to give Dharma talks or wisdom talks. In the first year of these practices, about 4 or 5 months into practice, I found a new translation of Hakuin's autobiography published in 2002. I bought that book and read it, and at the very end, read Hakuin's recommendation for a particular kind of meditation that Hakuin called the butter pill meditation, and involves health and visualization. It's a healing meditation. Hakuin revived Zen in Japan in the 14th century. As Hakuin struggled on his search for enlightenment and experienced different forms of meditation, he decided to go to Japan and find ancient Chinese Chan masters to see what may have been lost in the transmission of Chan Buddhism to Japan. Bodhidharma had come from India to Japan in the 4th century, meditated, then founded the Shaolin Monastery, and became the father of Chan Buddhism, which is a melding in part of Taoism and Buddhism. So, in essence, Hakuin had learned a form of meditation that attributes its roots to the start of Chan Buddhism in China. What attracted me to Hakuin's meditation was that he explained the butter pill meditation, that is. He explained that it's very simple. He described it in 2 paragraphs. He also said you don't need to know philosophy, you don't need to know concepts, you don't need to have to think a certain way. You just have to do this and see what changes. It's a healing practice in which one visualizes a healing butter-like substance shaped like a duck egg, and then the substance penetrating the crown of the head and penetrating every single element of the body, with a visualization that this butter will warm and heal every organ that it touches, every element it touches: bones, skin, blood vessels, liver, kidneys, anything throughout the body. In hindsight, I began a daily practice of the Hakuin meditation, along with the other ones I described. In hindsight, I think that the Hakuin meditation complemented the mindfulness of the body in the body, or the first foundation of mindfulness. Because not only was I practicing awareness of the body, in the body, I was practicing with a Hakuin meditation, directing healing energy toward all those same elements in the body that I was learning to be aware of. This process continued in these forms of meditation. About 3.5 months ago, I ran across some Buddhist literature explaining Bodhidharma's role with Qigong and Tai Chi. And when I read it, I found out that Bodhidharma decided that his monks were too weak to do sitting as they got older and lazier. They were too physically weak and unhealthy. So he undertook both the physical training of the monks, the external martial arts, and the internal training of the monks, or what is now known as Qigong. Qigong is a moving meditation. Medical Qigong is a part of Oriental medicine. Qigong had existed for a few thousand years before Bodhidharma came along. Many of the forms of Qigong practice today trace their lineages to Bodhidharma. And I began a little over 3 months ago daily practices in Tai Chi and Qigong, both of which I like. When I read the literature, I realized that what I had been practicing from Hakuin is probably a form of Qigong, that I had in fact been doing a visualization practice, healing practice, for years without knowing much about its roots. This brings me back to childhood toxic stress. In 2015, a scientific journalist published a book about toxic stress. It's called Childhood Disrupted. In it, she explains that she read pretty much most of the literature, the scientific studies that led to the book. Also, she interviewed most of the major researchers on child toxic stress. Also, she followed some adults who were able to become healthier or who became healthy. And she explains a lot of things that I relate to that I didn't have a name for and that I did not understand for a long time. Uh, were passed on to me, so to speak. That's the thought that came to me when I was laughing a month ago, that I did not have to know the causes and conditions of whatever led me to feel uh, incredible stress and depression, anxiety, in order to go through a healing process. It's wonderful to actually read uh, the science and literature and to recognize that I'm not the only one that has been going through uh, the long-term impact of childhood toxic stress. The other thing that I really liked about getting the book, I'd ordered it and it came in last week, was I went to a chapter on healing and read took a quick look at the headlines for the healing modalities. They include walking in nature, which has been part of my mindfulness walking practices. They include loving kindness or metta practices. They include forgiveness practices. They include compassion practices. They include Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, or other forms of energetics practices. Um, I feel incredibly lucky that I stumbled onto these different kinds of practices um, through the course of the last 13 and a half years. Um, I know now that what I felt were permanent and natural were not, that I am not at the same inside where I was 14 years ago, 15 years ago. Um, that it is practice that changed things. It wasn't what I thought would happen. It's hard to have any kind of relevant thoughts about states of being that I had never experienced. I had no idea what feeling peaceful would be like. I had no idea what it would be like to slowly drop judgments of other people, drop my own judgments. I had no idea what it would be like to recognize the inner bully, the inner critic, to uh, not be living on other people's opinions, to overcome shame and guilt, both of which are obstacles to any kind of healthy recovery, healthy spiritual growth. In my channel, I've only done one other YouTube video, which I've uploaded. It explains Hakuin's Butterpill meditation. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can take a look at that video. Everything I've talked about is now in publications, in books, or on the web, a variety of articles, uh, variety of resources for people like me. If you heard something that resonates with you in your own life, I ask you to be kind and compassionate to yourself and don't give up. None of what I described came fast. I wouldn't have known what it felt like if I hadn't done a daily practice. Sometimes I use an analogy. You can have somebody drowning under 90 fathoms of water and feeling the pressure, bring that person up to 10 fathoms under the water. He's just he's higher by 80 fathoms, and he can feel some release of pressure, but he's still drowning. So I can't say that with what has happened inside, that I might not realize a year from now or 2 years from now that I was still coming up from drowning. Um, that's one of the things I learned about this process is that the words describing it isn't really understandable when the feelings, when I've never felt those things, when I've never experienced those things. Um, Thank you, and I hope all of you and wish all of you to be free of pain and suffering, to learn to be compassionate to yourself, and to learn that there is a joyful life in each of us.